A little while ago, I made a video about the realities of running an S19J Pro, and I don't think people who are new to ASIC mining know just how power hungry, loud, and hot these machines can be. But if you're looking at an L3 Plus or an L3 Plus Plus instead, there's good news all around. They're smaller, cheaper to buy, cheaper to run, a significant amount quieter, and they put out about a third as much heat as the big boys. I'm here to talk about the realities of running an Antminer L3 Plus. My name is Nicholas Johnson, and this is the Space Warehouse. The Bitmain Antminer L3 Plus is built to do just one thing: mine cryptocurrencies using the Scrypt mining algorithm. This miner will dig up a variety of coins using Scrypt. Currently, the most profitable being merge mining Litecoin and Dogecoin. Although, depending on what moment you refresh the online calculators out there, sometimes just throwing the hash power on NiceHash is just as profitable. We'll start with the money. When measuring in US dollars, and this is only going to be true for right now because at every moment the profitability is changing based on the difficulty and the price of the coins. But right now, after paying for electricity, one of these machines will bring home about $5 to $6 a day equivalent in cryptocurrency, which is about $150 a month. There is an enormous supply of Antminer L3s on the market right now due to China shutting down a big portion of their operations. People are selling them on eBay and Amazon and all the forums right now on a pretty big markup because of the current craze in the price of Bitcoin, or in this case Litecoin, that we're experiencing right now. What a time to be alive. On to the power. The regular outlets that look like this in your house or in your garage will send 120 volts of power into whatever you plug into them. And there are typically 3 exceptions to that: the plug for your dryer, your water heater, and the one for your stove. Those run at 240 volts, but they will look obviously different and you probably don't have a plug that'll fit into them. Fun fact, if you're in a commercial setting, the power running through your walls will either be at 120 volts or 208 volts instead of 240 volts, but that makes no difference to the miner. Luckily though, you don't have to know anything about any of that because the L3 Plus and L3 Plus Plus will run perfectly reliably on 120 volts, 208 volts, or 240 volts. This is true of most computer power supplies as well, and sometimes people will use those to power these machines. That means you can literally plug in one of these machines just about anywhere. If you have zero understanding about breakers and amps and watts and power in general, there's just the simplest bit of math you'll need to do if you're going to share this circuit with anything else. If the plug looks like this, you have 15 amps available to you. This plug runs at 120 volts, and therefore you can push 1800 watts through it before it'll pop the breaker. Your L3 Plus will use between 6 and 8 amps, which equates to between 800 and 1000 watts, depending on the model that you get. So there's quite a bit of extra headroom on that outlet. If your plug looks like this instead, you've got 20 amps on that circuit. That means you can send 2,400 watts through it before it will blow the breaker. You can safely run 2 machines on a plug that looks like this. The little line on the side is the indication. When you get into 208 or 240 volt circuits, say if you live in Europe or if you had an electrician come put a dedicated line in for your miners, your L3 Plus will use the same number of watts but half the number of amps. Amps are the important thing to consider when it comes to your breaker panel. So if your electrician tells you you have a 30 amp breaker on a 240 volt circuit, your L3 Plus is only going to use about 4 amps. Go buy some more. One of the realities of owning an Antminer L3 Plus is that you're eventually going to go buy more Antminer L3 Pluses. One of the easiest ways to power a bunch of miners is with a PDU, a power distribution unit. The plug end that goes into your miner is called a C13. You'll recognize this plug end as basically everything that goes into monitors and printers and the PSU from your desktop PC. These PDUs will have a whole row of sockets for a C13 to C14 power cable. Very cheap on Amazon, I'll link it in the description below. So you can plug a single PDU into the wall, and from it you can power a bunch of ASIC miners. I also power my bigger S19J Pros this way because each one of them requires 2 power cables. Each one of those miners gets its own PDU that it just shares with one L3 Plus because the S19J Pro wants 20 amps just for itself. Now that you've got it powered, you're going to need to put it somewhere. The L3 Plus is not a quiet machine. It's not as loud as the bigger miners, but it's not anywhere near as quiet as like GPU mining or really anything else that you have plugged in at a normal house. If you have a family or roommates, or if you live with your significant other, you're not going to get away with plugging this in inside the house. I'd say it's about as loud and a similar pitch to a hairdryer, just running all the time. You don't ever shut it off. The L3 Plus's operating temperature is between 0 and 40 degrees Celsius, which is 32 to 104 degrees Fahrenheit. If you were to leave even a single one of these just alone in a room and shut the door, it'll pretty quickly heat up that room and just turn itself off. It's got a safety feature so it doesn't overheat. And in the summertime, you're going to want to be careful even just putting it in your garage, unless you're ventilating to the outdoors, because it'll heat the place up eventually. They don't require air-conditioned air, just rapidly moving air, and recycling the same air is generally a bad idea. You'll want to ventilate its heat to the outside outside, which also means bringing outside air inside. I've seen some people piping the hot air into their HVAC system as a closed loop, which is clever, but the noise will follow the heat in there, so be ready for that. Ventilating air outdoors, if you put a fan in a window and blow it outdoors, is going to create a vacuum in whatever space you're doing that from. If it's your house, that means that air is going to have to be replaced from somewhere. And if you're not providing that air, then it's just going to come in through the windows and doors and microscopic cracks in your attic or just wherever it can. It's just sort of a reality of physics. So if you're ventilating to the outdoors from a room inside your house, it would be best to replace the air in that room from the same room from outside, so that you're not sucking air-conditioned air into that room from the rest of your house and causing a bigger burden on your HVAC system or your electric bill, or both. Hot air out, fresh air back in. At my setup, I have a big industrial fan built into an exterior door of my warehouse in this small dedicated room. The fan's designed to replace the entire volume of air in there with cool, filtered air every 6 seconds or so. Then at the front of the warehouse, 2 very large doors are cracked just enough from the floor to allow that same amount of air to replace it. You might even call it the perfect setup. The industrial fan may seem a little overkill, but I'm running about 13,000 watts through there, and so it's creating a lot of heat that has to get dumped out continuously. If you can solve for heat and noise and have some unused circuits at wherever you want to run these machines, then you found yourself a great little source of passive income. Litecoin has been around almost as long as Bitcoin, and it doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon. In fact, their prices seem to sort of follow the same shape on the graph. Dogecoin is maybe a little more suspect, but there are several other coins that use the Scrypt algorithm to mine. So it looks like these little ant miners that were first released in 2017 still have a few years left of profitability.